Today, I'm previewing the 2025 SEC schedule, their teams, it's just going to come down to who's actually a contender and who's just part of the SEC and will brag that they are getting beat by the biggest arms in college football. We know who they are, and I'm going to dive into it in just a second. I'm glad you're hanging out with me here on my channel, the new channel, Another College Football Podcast, because there's so many, and I just wanted to add another one. If you like what I'm doing, and if you like talking about college football, if you're an SEC fan, if you're an ACC fan, if you just absolutely love the Sun Belt, I hope you'll subscribe. It is free, and I do appreciate it. The channel in about a week has already grown to over 130 subscribers, so hey, that's pretty good for me. But if you would like to support the channel, I hope you'll do that. So let's dive right in. The SEC is a conference that if you're in it, you hold it in clear and total reverence. You brag about being part of the SEC, especially if you're a team that really doesn't win that much. You're like, well, I know we lose a lot, but we lose to the best in the country. But if you're one of those teams who, wins all the times, if you're someone like Georgia, who for them, they're probably getting a little antsy. They haven't won a national championship in a few years. They're very close to a three-peat. Or maybe Alabama, who was coached by probably the best coach to ever coach college football, arguably, of our lifetime. Or maybe if you're Texas, someone who used to win, they haven't won a national championship since 2005, but now they're very close. They're doing their thing, and they have something special going on in Austin. It's a little different for them. So today, I'm going to do something different from my last video where I broke down the ACC and I started at the top. I'm actually going to start at the bottom here. Now, I won't completely say that this is a ranking of the SEC, but it's going to be pretty close. Let's go to the cellar of the Southeastern Conference and let's talk about, the teams who's just glad to be there. What's interesting about these first two teams that I'm going to name, one coach is in year 2. The other coach is in year 13. Again, we can just kind of say it really doesn't matter who's at the bottom. These two are definitely at the bottom of the SEC. So let's start with tenure. The Kentucky Wildcats, coached by Mark Stoops going into his 13th year. A few years ago, there was a thought that he would be going to Texas A&M. That ended up not happening. He stayed at Kentucky. Last year he went 4-8. The best season that they've had in the past few years was in 2021 when they went 10-3. But Mark Stoops is coaching at a basketball school. A basketball school, that's right. And this year, he returns 8 starters on the offense, 5 on the defense. When you look at their schedule, it's not that easy. Now, let's go ahead and get this out of the way. I know that we could say that playing in the SEC, most of the time the schedule is going to be difficult. This is true. But there are some teams you may be a little shocked at how much more palatable, a little more doable their schedule is. And you'll see that throughout this video. The big games for Kentucky this year is at South Carolina on September the 27th. By the way, they could come into this game potentially 2-1. And I skipped a game there. September the 6th, they play Ole Miss. They're at South Carolina on September the 27th. They're at Georgia the very next week. Then they're off. Then they play Texas at home. They play Tennessee at home. They're at Auburn. They play Florida. They finish out at Vanderbilt, at Louisville. For a team that I just think they're struggling, I think they definitely have their work cut out for them. They definitely will probably struggle, quite bad this year. Let's move on to a team who Jeff Lebby has his second year at Mississippi State. Now, we know how things were ran during the Dan Mullen years. They had a pretty good season back in 2022, but before then and after then, it has not been good. It's been a minute for the Mississippi State Bulldogs. As far as their schedule goes, they have one of the hands down toughest schedules in the country. They're playing Arizona State. They play Tennessee. They're at Texas A&M. They're at Florida. They play Texas. They play Georgia. And they finish out with Ole Miss. I mean, sure, you could talk about they return most of their starters on the offense. You could talk about that they have over half their defense coming back. But for a team who just transparently does not look that good overall, and you're just trying to get some traction, it could very well turn pretty bad for them. I mean, again, out of conference, you have Arizona State, a team that was the darlings of the college football playoff. Everyone was pulling for them. You couldn't help but pull for them. And don't forget, you kick off the season at Southern Miss. Don't forget also that the head coach, I believe it's Charles Huff. I know his last name's Huff, but I'm pretty sure it's Charles Huff. The coach at Marshall, they just won the Sun Belt. You remember that? He ended up leaving and taking the job at Southern Miss. And a lot of the team from Marshall, that team had just won the Sun Belt. I think they won 10 games. They went with him. So that Southern Miss game may be an L already. Hopefully they'll give Jeff Lebby a little bit of patience, give him a little bit of time. Now I'm gonna move a little quicker here. As we move forward, the teams obviously are going to get better. Now, last year, one of the best stories in college football comes to us by way of Nashville, Tennessee. If you know anything about Nashville, you know that it is the capital of country music. And you know that football is not very good there. Clark Lee has had his work cut out at Vanderbilt. But last year they went 7-6. Now, you would have thought that they were going to be the best team in the country at sometimes. Just how people were talking about them. I mean, you got to think at one time they were 2-2. Their 2 losses last year, when they were 2-2, they lost to Georgia State at Georgia State, 36-32. They lost at Missouri 30-27. Now that one you were like, oh, this kind of makes sense. Missouri's a good football team. This is Vanderbilt. They beat Alabama for the first time in like 40 years. They beat Kentucky. They beat Ball State. They played Texas, almost beat Texas. They lost by 3 points. That was very impressive. They beat Auburn. And then after that, the wheels came off. They lost South Carolina, a very good South Carolina team. As much as I'm a Clemson fan, I hate to admit it. That was a good South Carolina team. They played at LSU, only lost by 7 points. And they played Tennessee, lost by 13. Diego Pavia is back. Diego Pavia is fired up. He's ready to go. He's talking trash. Everybody wants to see him play. But folks, I'm just going to tell you, they have 17 returning starters from last year, and maybe I'm dead wrong. But I think the ceiling for them is pretty low, unfortunately. They open up with Charleston Southern. They're at Virginia Tech. They're at South Carolina. They play Georgia State again. They play Utah State, at Alabama, LSU, Missouri. I'll get to them in just a second. They're very close. They're one of the teams next up. They're at Texas, Auburn, Kentucky, and at Tennessee. Now, if they come in and they play with a lot of unity, and they've truly made if they've truly made improvements. Let me tell you this: good. They could go 7-6 again, 6-6, maybe 8-4 potentially. But when I look at South Carolina, I look at Alabama, I look at LSU, I look at Texas, and I look at Tennessee, there's 5 losses right there. And you have other toss-ups with Missouri. Auburn, where will Auburn be? Now, the next team I want to talk about is a team that a lot of people seem for some reason to believe that they're going to be much, much better this year. And I guess we can cut off the really, really bad teams. But in this next section, if you want to call it that, these teams are not necessarily bad, but these teams have a lot of questions to still answer. And I look no farther than the Auburn Tigers. Auburn is starting to sneak up people's boards. This is a team that was 5-7 last year. This is Hugh Freeze's 3rd season. In fact, I did not expect him to go 5-7 last year. He gets the Oklahoma quarterback, the highly recruited Jackson Arnold. He's at Auburn. And they have 9 returning offensive starters. A little over half their starters return on defense. I would pump my brakes on this team before I started talking about, hey, they're going to be better in the SEC. Maybe they're going to be a little better because last year they were not good. I mean, granted, they beat Texas A&M last year. And they beat Kentucky. That was their only conference wins last year, folks. They won 2 games in conference last year. Now, could that turn around? Sure. They play at Baylor, opening up. Who knows there? A few weeks later, 3 weeks later, you're at Oklahoma for their homecoming. That'll be interesting for Jackson Arnold. At Texas A&M after that. They're off. Then they play Georgia. They play Missouri, who's kind of a toss-up. At Arkansas, a toss-up. Ask Tennessee. Tennessee lost there. Play Kentucky. At Vanderbilt, they're off. They play Mercer, and then they finish off, as they always do, with Alabama. This time it'll be on the Plains. But I'm sitting here looking at their team with a major question mark. As I look through different sports books, I'm looking at different sports books, and I'm reading different things about the SEC, and I'm trying to really get a grasp on who is the SEC, who is the main players, who are people who are actually going to be worth a crap. And when I look at this, when I look at what they're saying and I look at where they're putting Auburn above certain teams, I'm sitting there going, but why? It's like a 3-year-old asking that question, but why? Well, it's because of this, that, and the other. But really? Do you really believe that? And that's the thing with Auburn. I really think that this Hugh Freeze tenure, I'm shocked it's not any better. I really am. I am really shocked that it is not any better. It's kind of, definitely questionable for me. Let's move to another team that a lot of people are iffy about. Now, last year they went 10-3. In 2023, they went 11-2. It's the Missouri Tigers. Eli Drinkwitz, in year number 6, he's got his team rolling. Brady Cook. Brady Cook is gone. He's done. And he had a really good career. At Missouri. And I'm going to tell you this: this team could win some games and look better than what they are to a point. And you're like, hold on, what do you mean? Their big games is South Carolina on September the 20th. They play Alabama. They're at Auburn. They play Texas A&M, at Oklahoma, and at Arkansas. Now, I'm not saying that they have an easy schedule. They don't have an easy schedule. I mean, they have Alabama. They have a South Carolina team who did quite well last year. You have Texas A&M, who is up and down. I mean, they have talent. They have money. Sure, ask them, they'll tell you. But let's ask ourselves, let's just kind of be a little more pessimistic. South Carolina earlier on in the season, it could be easier to catch them off guard in your fourth game. Alabama. Let's just say Alabama beats you. Can we say without a shadow of a doubt that you're going to lose that Texas A&M game? I can't say that. I lean towards A&M winning that game. I look at Alabama, and let's just say Alabama's a loss. Let's say Texas A&M is a loss. All right? But let's say South Carolina's a toss-up. Let's say Oklahoma's definitely a toss-up. Arkansas is a toss-up. And you win most of those. Let's even be generous and say South Carolina beats you. There's 3 losses, folks. I mean, you're sitting pretty at a 9-3 record. And I'm telling you, it's much doable. It's very, very much doable. The only thing that I would say about Missouri is they are one of these teams, and I'm going to do a video on this, where I take certain people's schedules or certain teams' schedules. I look at the schedule and I simply poke holes in it. And by poking holes, what I mean is your schedule is easier than others. Therefore, you may look better than what you actually are. You may look like you're really solid when in fact your schedule's not that good. There's going to be teams who could potentially end up in in a conference championship and be okay. They're not really good. They're average, but we've seen this before. This is one of those teams to keep your eye out on because their schedule can be quite friendly. And we saw last year 2 and 3 loss SEC teams being considered for the college football playoff. I'm not saying that about Missouri, but I'm just saying that's how much respect the SEC gets for its strength of schedule. Talking about strength of schedule, Arkansas has a ridiculous schedule as well. Sam Pittman going into year 6. He had that incredible year in 2021, and since then, his best record 7-6. Arkansas was not an easy job. It's been a long time since Arkansas was good. A guy named Bobby Petrino was on the sidelines. And so I step back. I look at Arkansas. I look at a schedule that starts off with 2 easier games. Then you're at Mississippi. You play Notre Dame. You're at Tennessee. You play Texas A&M. You play at LSU and at Texas. And I just brought up Missouri just a second ago, but I'm not including them there. You have one of the toughest schedules, hands down, in college football. I'm talking about a top 5 schedule. And returning 7 on offense and only a little over half your defense with a team that went 7-6 last year. And in a lot of those losses, it was it was quite a sizable loss. I mean, they lost to LSU by 24 points last year. They lost to Mississippi by 32 points. I mean, those are some big losses. Yeah, you could say, oh, well, they played kind of close with A&M. They only lost by 4. They only lost by 10 points to Texas, a team that would go into the college football playoff. They lost by 7 points to Missouri. Okay, I get it. This team right here is being praised or not praise, but there's a little more expectation that they'll do better this year. And they very well, if they don't get everything moving, they could very well join the cellar. They could join the cellar, and that would be interesting in itself. Let's talk about as we move here. It's the teams are getting tougher. Now, this team has a lot of expectation. You would be shocked that they are in front of certain teams, and a lot of people are expecting them to do a lot better this year. Could they? Absolutely. They returned 15 starters across the board, split even on as much as you can, 8-7 on offense and defense. DJ Lagway is the story. And of course, I'm talking about the Florida Gators. Last year, at one time, they were 4-5. DJ Lagway took over. Guess what? They went 8-5. I'm at a loss for words. A lot of people were putting bets on Billy Napier of exactly what point of the season he would be fired. I mean, really. This is a Florida team. This is a Florida team that lost to Miami 41-17. Cam Ward, in the very first game of the year, picked them apart. They lost by 13 points to A&M. They barely lost to Tennessee, believe it or not. They lost by 14 to Georgia. They lost by 32 points to Texas. But the point here is they are getting better. Lagway saved Billy Napier's job. He ended up keeping his job. But I think that they're going to have to prove more before I start to put them in the categories of some of these better teams. A lot of people believes that this is a top 6 team in the SEC. And right now, I can't say that. Their big games at LSU, at Miami, they're off. Then they play Texas. Then they play Texas A&M. A few weeks later, they play Georgia. They play at Mississippi, Ole Miss. They play Tennessee, and they play Florida State. Who knows what Florida State's going to be like? This schedule is tough. And if Lagway comes out and plays like a man, if Lagway comes out and he's perfectly healthy and he has the players around him, okay, good. Maybe, just maybe, they actually return to some type of competitive form, like completely through the season. But here is the problem. The problem is that the team still has so much to prove. They have so much to prove. And I just don't see them being in that middle pack. If anything, I see them in the lower middle pack right now. And if I was Florida, I would want to be seen that way. Let's move to another team. Now, this team I know very well. I know this team very well because they're the rivals of my favorite team. It's the South Carolina Gamecocks. South Carolina Gamecocks going into year 5 with Shane Beamer. Shane Beamer has taken a team who has very little history. And what I mean is winning history at South Carolina. And he's done something quite remarkable. Last year they were 9-4. Had a few more plays went a little differently for them. They could have possibly went to the college football playoff. They didn't. But they were one of the hottest teams in college football in the last 6 weeks of the season. They won 6 consecutive games last year, including beating my Tigers. And I hated every second of it. And a lot of that goes to Lenora Sellers. Lenora Sellers is a good quarterback. He's very physical. You can hit him low, and he's going to run right through you. You try to hit him high, you better gang tackle him. They have guys like Dylan Stewart on the defense, a guy that's projected first rounder. But the key with South Carolina, and I know South Carolina fans are going to have a good comeback, just like any good rivalry-based fan would want to say to someone like me who's a Clemson fan and say, well, Mike Shula is the new OC and he knows what he's doing and so on. Folks, Dowell Loggins can coach football. And now he's at Appalachian State as the head coach. It'll be interesting to see how the new OC and Lenora Sellers gets along. Also, one thing about Lenora Sellers you have to watch out for. He throws high. He can throw high. You'll see him fall back into that habit from time to time. Nick Harbor, 6'5", Olympic speed. Are they going to get him more involved? We saw what he did against Alabama last year. I mean, just posting up a defensive back and catching that football. Of course, I'm a Clemson fan. I don't care if they win. But to be fair to them, this team's schedule is difficult, as it always is. This is really difficult. And the first part of the season is quite doable. There's a good chance that they'll be 5-0 going into their game at LSU on October the 11th. Then they play Oklahoma. Then they play Alabama. Then on November the 1st, they're at Mississippi. Then they're off. Then they're at Texas A&M. And then they finish off the year with Clemson, a team who is preseason top 5. The question is, will the offensive coordinator and Lenora Sellers, let me rephrase that, will the offensive coordinator be creative when he needs to be creative, and then just at times just say, Lenoris, do what you do, man. It'll be interesting to see that. But that's a team to definitely watch and see how they handle the season. Because when you get into the second half of the season, it gets crazy. Let's talk about the Tennessee Volunteers. Last year, they won 10 games. The year before that, 9-4. The year before that was that incredible 2022 season. They were 11-2. They beat Florida. They beat Alabama. We all remember that. In the offseason, we know what happened with Nico. He's now with UCLA. And the interesting part about that, they went and got Appalachian State starting quarterback Joey Aguilar. I saw him play in person at Appalachian State. By the way, it's a beautiful place up there. You should go up there and check out a game. There's not a bad seat in that stadium. You should go check it out. Beautiful area as well. But now he's in Knoxville, Tennessee, another area that I really like. But it's a totally different game. It's a totally different game in Knoxville. In this year, you have only 5 offensive returning starters. Only 5 offensive returning starters. You do have 8 on the defensive side of the ball. But I'm going to tell you this. When Clemson was trying to get potentially get Tim Banks from Tennessee, I had Tennessee fans that said, listen, we're not impressed with our defense. And if y'all get him, I don't think you're going to be impressed with the defense. So that's one thing to keep in the back of your mind. But their schedule is doable. And you're like, define doable. Well, remember what happened this past year with 2 and 3 loss SEC teams getting very close to getting into the college football playoff. This Tennessee team kicks off the season in Atlanta against Syracuse, a team who had a really good season last year, but they lost a bunch of people. They're not expected to do much this year. But you play Georgia on September the 13th. Then you go on down to October the 18th. A month later, you're at Alabama. Then you play Oklahoma. That game's going to be in Knoxville. By the way, the Georgia game will be in Knoxville. You'll play at Florida on November the 22nd. Normally that game is much earlier in the season. This time around, it's going to be next to the last game of the year. Obviously, they play Vanderbilt, not seeing that being a big game. What I'm trying to say here is, let's just say they lose to Georgia. Let's say they lose to Alabama. That's 2 losses in conference. They could still be in the hunt to even make the if everybody, the word that was thrown around, cannibalized, they beat up on one another, they destroy one another, Tennessee could very well be in the mix to go to the conference championship and maybe not be the best team in the conference. I'm not knocking you, Vols. I mean, hey, you play the cards that's dealt to you, right? So Tennessee could very well do that. Notice I didn't move them on up as one of the top tier teams, but I'm telling you, this is a team that could very well do that. So it'll be interesting to see where they end up. Now we're getting a little closer to the top here. And I want to talk about the Texas A&M Aggies. Mike Elko going into year 2. I like Mike Elko. The guy can coach. He knows what he's doing. When he was at Duke, you saw what he did there. Duke is one of the toughest jobs in America. And he won there. He was a pain. Now, they return 8 of their offensive starters, 7 of their defensive starters. Last year, he went 8-5. Barely lost to Notre Dame, where they lost by 10 points. They got shellacked by South Carolina. I will tell you that. They got the crap beat down by South Carolina. They ended up losing by 2 points to Auburn. They lost by 10 points to Texas in the very last game of the year. So other than one ball game, you had one game that definitely could have went different for them. And then you had a few games that a couple of plays would go a little different for you. You may have, 2 more wins, 3 more wins. But this team, they're playing at Notre Dame on September the 13th. Florida, they're at LSU on October the 25th. They play South Carolina, and then they're at Texas in the very last ball game of the year. Marcel Reed is going to be running the show. And the question is he ready? Is the players around him ready? Now, KC Concepcion, this is a guy who did very well at NC State 2 years ago. Unbelievable. Unbelievable player. And last year, NC State was a dumpster fire. Probably one of the worst NC State teams I've seen in quite a while. But this guy, he can play ball. And he bolted for Texas A&M. I don't blame him. I think Elko is on the up and up. And I would want to go play for Elko if I was KC. It's just the question is, will you go through this schedule and you win more of the bigger games and you don't drop any of the games you don't supposed to drop? That's what I'm looking at with him and kind of scratching my head. Next up, I want to talk about the Ole Miss Rebels. They were 10-3 last year. Lane is going into year 6, and he's done a pretty doggone good job down there. You hear people talk about, oh, well, he goes to the transfer portal, and he goes and he gets all these players. This year, they only have 6 returning starters on the offense, 6 returning starters on the defense, and that's going to be a problem. If there's anyone who can play this game well, it's Lane Kiffin. Now, their schedule is in their favor. What do I mean by that? Is there are people out there who has crazy schedules. And then there are people who they don't have as many big games. And like I said about Tennessee, they could lose 2 conference games, maybe end up in the conference championship, because these other teams are having to play Texas and Alabama and Georgia, and they're all playing one another, and one gets 2 losses, one gets 3 losses, and then there's a tie, and then there's a tiebreaker here and there, and maybe you catch one of those teams off guard and you get the tiebreaker with it. I mean, it can get weird. Ole Miss is one of those teams, folks, that has a schedule that they could possibly do something like that. You're like, explain to me. All right, I'll explain to you. Explain it to me. And before I go any further, I do want to say this. They lost to Kentucky last year. They had no business losing to them. They lost by only 3 points. They lost to LSU at LSU. How many points? 3 points. They lost at Florida by 7 points. Lane was this close, folks. He was that close. And he hits the transfer portal hard. But let's talk about his schedule this year. By the time he gets to his 5th game, which is LSU, and it will be in Oxford, he could be 4-0. Then he plays at Georgia, at Oklahoma, South Carolina, Florida on November the 15th, and then that doesn't even matter. It's the last game of the year. It's Mississippi State. They're not good at all. But if you step back and you look at this game, and let's just say you say he loses to LSU, he loses at Georgia, but the other games are toss-up. That toss-up could fall in his favor. It'll be very interesting to see how Lane does because, I mean, the schedule compared to others is a lot more favorable than other teams. All right. Next up for me, a team that has a head coach that I know very well. And in Clemson, he's royalty. When you think about the national championship runs in Clemson, South Carolina, 2 in 3 years, you had different quarterbacks who won it, but you had the same defense that was being led by one guy, and it's Brent Venables. He's going into year 4 at Oklahoma. He took over a decimated Oklahoma team. In fact, you could almost call them the artist formerly known as Oklahoma. Now, last year was not a good season for them. They got ripped a new one by their rival, Texas. They had to sit and watch Texas go to the college football playoff. The next week, the University of South Carolina beat the crap out of them. And so, you're kind of wondering what is next for Brent Venables. Now, remember, in his second season, they went 10-3. Granted, they were in the Big 12, but they went 10-3. Jackson Arnold transferred out, but they brought in Washington State's John Mateer. It was a big get out of the transfer portal. What I look at with this team, they're playing a pretty tough schedule as well. They play Michigan. They have Texas. Obviously, that's the whole Red River rivalry. Say that fast 3 times. At South Carolina, they play Ole Miss. They're at Tennessee. Those are 4 games in a row, folks. They get a game off. What do? They go to Alabama. And then they finish out with LSU. Folks, I'm going to tell you this. If things don't go well for them, they could end up lower middle tier to lower tier record-wise. And I'm just sitting here looking at this, and there's a part of me that's kind of asking, why am I seeing everybody boost them on up the rankings in the SEC when, as I'm looking at their schedule right now, maybe I should have pushed them back a couple of teams. I mean, maybe they should be. Maybe this is more of a little bit of a wish list that I'm seeing with people that Oklahoma is going to be better this year. I hope for Brent Venables they are, because I think they'll fire Brent Venables, and I don't think that he's been given I don't think he's been dealt a good hand. Let's move up as we're getting closer to the end here of the SEC. We have about 4 or 5 teams left. Let's talk about LSU. And as we're getting to the bigger teams here, I'm just going to move a little faster. Garrett Nussmeier comes into this game rated one of the top quarterbacks in the country. Brian Kelly going into year 4. Last year they went 9-4. They have not won an opening game, the season opener, in 5 years. That includes the years of Ed Orgeron. They do return 8 starters on each side of the ball. You guessed it, the schedule's tough. They're at Clemson in the very first game of the year on August the 30th. They play Florida on September the 13th. They're at Mississippi on the 27th. They're off. Then they play South Carolina at home. They play Texas A&M at home. They're off on November 1st, and then they play at Alabama, and then they finish out the season in the last couple of games. Let me see. No, I'm sorry. At Oklahoma, the very, very last game of the year. This is a team that has the talent to come out and contend for the SEC championship. They have the ability to play football at an extremely high level. LSU always has talent. Saying LSU recruits well or they have talented players is like saying something like water is wet. The question is, can Brian Kelly win the big games? Because the big games have evaded him over the years. Brian Kelly is not a bad football coach. I don't see him being a fit for LSU. He's not a bad football coach. But when he gets to the big games, most of the time, more times than not, they lose. Next up, Alabama Crimson Tide. Nick Saban's not standing on the sidelines. Last year was one of the first times in a long time they didn't win 10 games plus. They went 9-4. And saying Alabama, it still strikes fear into the heart of others. You know it, I know it, we all know. The interesting thing about this is that we know Ryan Williams, the young man, when he was 17 years old, made Georgia look silly. He's playing for them. They have talent everywhere. Jam Miller lining up at running back. And someone between Ty Simpson, Austin Mack, and Keelan Russell will play quarterback for them. They have Caden Proctor, one of the top offensive linemen in the country already. He's doing his thing. And when you look at their schedule, they're at Florida State, but we're not talking about a Bobby Bowden Florida State team. We're not talking about a Florida State team that was led by famous Jameis when they won the national championship. This is a different Florida State team. So that's a big name on paper, but it's not a big game. You play at Georgia on September the 27th. You play Tennessee on October the 18th. That'll be in Tuscaloosa. You're at South Carolina. You have LSU and Oklahoma coming to Tuscaloosa. And then you're at Auburn at the very end of the year, as you will always play Auburn at the end of the year. This is an odd schedule because if only Georgia lives up to their hype and everyone else kind of goes, Alabama could easily lose only one ball game this year. And I would have to be careful in saying that they were not good, but are they Saban good? Because if you're not Saban good and you lose to Georgia, but you find out that all those other teams struggled, the question is, are you really that good? Look at Tennessee. Oh, we got into the college football playoff and got the color beat out of their jerseys by the team who ended up winning it all. Can Alabama stomach that if that were to happen? Or are they actually just that good? Maybe so. We're coming down to the last two teams, and you know who they are. The last two teams that are front runners for the SEC, hands down. Start with Texas, excuse me. Texas has Arch Manning taking over. They have Ryan Wingo, the incredible wide receiver, a guy who kind of was overshadowed by guys like Jeremiah Smith at Ohio State. Can't blame them. Ryan Williams at Alabama. Can't blame them. But Wingo's one of those guys that can come out and tear it up. This is a team that went into the college football playoff and won a few games, but here's what you need to hear, folks. That Arch Manning finally has the keys. And in year 5 for Steve Sarkisian, a guy who over the past 2 years, won 12 plus games. And they're pumping money into the Longhorns like they always do. But they don't have an easy road this year. They're at Ohio State, very first game of the year. At Florida. Oklahoma, who knows? You're at Georgia, and your very last game of the year is Texas A&M. Now, you know me, I'm not going to talk trash about the Mannings. I've said this before. I'm not going to sit here and beat up on Arch Manning. I do believe that let's just say Arch Manning comes out and does well. He still won't be good enough in some people's eyes. And then other people, he could just do okay. And then they're going to just absolutely exaggerate how incredible it was. But we will see this year, according to who's around him and the play calls that they set up for him, because they only have 4 returning starters. Yes, Texas recruits well. I know this. We all know this. There's something about having starters around you. If he had like 8 or 9, 7 or 8 returning starters around him, I think that would make me probably put them in front of Georgia when it comes to rank. But Arch Manning finally has the keys to the car. Let's see how he drives it. The last team to talk about in the SEC is the Georgia Bulldogs. Kirby Smart is one of a few human beings in college football who has 2 national championships and still coaching. Dabo Swinney is the other one. They almost had a 3-peat. They were very close to a 3-peat. In fact, I thought they would get a 3-peat. They just looked that dominant. We know what happened. Carson Beck, he's no longer with the team. He's in Miami. And Carson Beck, when he was on, and when he was not on, well, just like anyone, they were not on. In 2023, his season was unbelievable. The guy just threw his brains out. Well, Gunnar Stockton, a guy from Rabun County, Georgia, takes over. He was a big recruit coming out of high school. He played last year when Beck got hurt. 6'1", about 220 pounds. And this is Georgia. Georgia has really good running backs. You don't have to look beyond Nate Frazier. Nate Frazier is a ridiculous talent. Then you throw in there that you got Zachariah Branch from Southern Cal, Oscar Delp, the incredible tight end. KJ Bolden, he's a sophomore, but my goodness, he looks like a man already. Dalen Everett. Needless to say, Georgia can play. Now, here's the deal. They returned 5 offensive starters, but a lot of, like Nate Frazier, there's no drop-off with Nate Frazier. You know it. I know it. We all know it. The guy was the leading rusher for the team last year. And he was splitting carries with Trevor Etienne. But Nate Frazier is the man. Now, their schedule's not easy at all. But it's, once again, doable. They play at Tennessee. They play Alabama. Ole Miss, that game, and listen to this, Alabama and Ole Miss will be in Athens, Georgia. They haven't lost in forever, if my memory serves me correct. Forever in Athens. They play Florida, of course, in Jacksonville. They play Texas, where? In Athens. So they get Alabama, Ole Miss, and Texas in Athens. That's crazy. I mean, really, that's crazy. Georgia, going into Kirby's 10th year, is with only 5 offensive returning starters, is a favorite to win the SEC, according to whoever you talk to. Why? They recruit well. Kirby knows what he's doing. And you're going to see someone. You're going to see someone in here out of this incredible recruiting class that they always have. Whether it's defensive lineman Elijah Griffin, step up. You're going to see guys like Zayden Walker, step up. You're going to see guys like Talon Taylor, step up. CJ Wiley, step up. They always do this, folks. They have these guys who just steps up and plays beyond their freshman ability. They do it. They do it all the flipping time. So it'll be interesting to see how the SEC works out. Let's just recap here. The top tier teams are kind of duh. It's Georgia. It's Texas. It's Alabama. LSU. And then you start to get into these weird teams who can ruin any of these guys' days. But they could also turn around and kind of have a mental brain fart and lose a game that you're sitting there going, you have no business losing that game. And I would go as far as to say that's probably more along the lines of a South Carolina, maybe a Florida I was talking about earlier, Texas A&M. Texas A&M, they're not an easy team to play, but they have shown they can lose. But this is second year for Mike Elko. Does he turn it around? He's the guy who can do it. And then you just have teams that's just absolutely terrible. We're talking about Mississippi State. We're talking about Kentucky. I don't expect Vanderbilt to do a rewind of last year. I think that's going to be a lot of wishful thinking and a lot of living off of last year. Could be wrong, but I just don't see it anything being different than that. Well, folks, let me know, what do you think? Who do you think's really going to be the leader of the SEC? Who do you think could be a surprise team? One of those teams that has an easier conference schedule, do you see them maybe sneaking into the conference championship because the bigger teams beat up on one another? They had more tough games and they ended up losing more conference games. And maybe the best team doesn't necessarily get in. It's happened. It's happened. We've all seen it happen. Will some of these teams, maybe a Missouri, be much better than what everyone's predicting? I want to hear it in the comment section. Leave it in the comment section. And listen, if you like what I'm doing, I know these first 2 videos I've done have been very long, but it's hard to cover SEC teams or SEC conference, the ACC conference. It's hard to cover conferences in 15 minutes. But my goal is for my regular videos to be about 15 minutes long. I hope you'll subscribe. It's free. Pass along to your friends, your neighbors, and anyone who likes talking college football. Folks, we're getting closer and closer to the season, and I look forward to watching it with you. Until next time, I'll catch you later. Go whoever you pull for. Unless they're Gamecocks. Just don't do that. I'll catch you next time.